What's a stupid thing you've done that you still think WTF did I do that for? Me, I wanted to kill the weeds between the slabs up to the front door. No ducking. One told me that they were going to crumble and dissolve if I used neat bleach. What an idiot. Have you anything stupid to make me laugh on this cold evening? P.S. Don't use bleach on certain slabs. Certainly not neat. Stood on a stool to lift Christmas presents, freshly wrapped, onto the top of my wardrobe. As I stood on it, the stool wobbled, so I stepped off. Despite that, and knowing it is a really wobbly stool, I again stood on it and then flipped of it and broke my wrist. Why didn't I just use another stool? I literally stepped off and back on again, because it had wobbled. I tripped on a high concrete curb. And I actually told myself not to put my hands out as I fell, because once I broke my wrist and it was painful. So I just went down like a sack of spuds. I broke 2 ribs. I can tell you that is hugely more painful than a broken wrist, and I probably wouldn't have broken my wrist anyway. I'd have just broken my full blush. The first thing the person who helped me said was, "Why the hell didn't you put your hands out?" I once got on an escalator, got a third of the way up and realized what I wanted was on the floor I was leaving, so I turned around and jumped off. It was a bizarre impulse. Fortunately, I landed on my feet on the footplate, though I was wearing heels and there was no one behind me. I couldn't quite believe I'd done it. Was very embarrassed. I was making a fancy curry from scratch and was grinding all the spices, including chili, mustard seeds, etc., in a pestle and mortar. I tipped the contents into the pan and noticed there was a fair bit of residue left in the pot. So I blew into it. The remaining spice dust thus ended up in my eyes. Probably top of my list of stupid things to have done. Thought I'd blinded myself. It was agony and my entire face swelled up. Stapled my finger to see if it hurt. This was a few years ago, and I still think WTAF. I was on a site, a forum-type place with occasional meetups in my area. I had seen this man there and we had talked anyway. He messaged me and we started chatting. I made it very clear I was only after friendship. I knew he was older, but not how old. He asked to meet up. I was free and thought, yeah, okay, why not? Why? Oh, why did I think that? Anyway, we met up, and he said let's go back to his for a drink as it was a bit cold out. So we walked to his, much further than he said. I was wearing heels. He proceeds to take me to his flat, which is in some kind of OAP's complex. He makes me a hot chocolate with squirty cream and marshmallows and is treating me a bit like a child. He then said he wanted to show me something in his bedroom. It's a 4-poster bed with fairy lights all on the top. He says lay down, it looks better. So I did. See, this is really a WTF was I thinking story. And as I'm laying there, feeling very uncomfortable, I notice a load of bandage equipment on the back of his door shock. I very quickly made my excuses and left. On my way home, I was just wondering WTF had happened and how the duck did I get myself into such a strange and dangerous situation. Oh, and it turned out he was in his late 70s. Oh, and he had legally changed his name to a well-known character, thing along the lines of Dumbledore. I broke my glasses once and in a panic I superglued them myself, totally wonky. Cue a trip to the opticians to find out that they could have fixed them if I hadn't glued them solid. Drunk. Got in a car outside the train station. Told the driver to take me home, about 7 miles away. Driver insisted that he wasn't a taxi driver. I insisted that he was. He drove me home. It was many years ago, and he had to rely on an AZ. He had literally just dropped his parents off at the station when I got in the car. I once threw an envelope in the bin without looking inside. A few days later, I went to find some train tickets I needed for the weekend to put with my luggage. I realized quickly they were in the envelope I'd thrown out. The train company fortunately reissued them for me. I was trying to get stuck flapjack out of a Pyrex dish with a very sharp paring knife, with the mound of Venus part of my hand in front of the point of the knife. Literally as I thought, this is really stupid, the knife slipped and plunged deep in my hand, with the point right through to the other side. Got home from the pub, I wondered if it was possible to climb up the drain pipe, and in my bedroom window to avoid having to open the front door, as I couldn't find my key in my bag as I was drunk. I got quite far up it, then couldn't work out how to actually get in the window, then couldn't get down. My elderly neighbor brought his ladders over to rescue me. Hope you are enjoying today's video from Mother's Narrative Network. Please like, comment and subscribe for more daily uploads. Don't forget to click the notification bell. After a very boozy night, my friend and I got in a cab to go home to my flat. I gave the address of a flat I hadn't lived in for about 10 years. Only when I got there did I think, why don't my keys fit? My friend had stayed at my flat loads of times and didn't question it either. 8 months pregnant and the size of a blue whale, I was painting my daughter's bedroom. She had a stool that was known for being a bit wobbly and best not to sit on it, but she really wanted to keep it as it had been given to her by my aunt. I really needed to reach the bit above her door, so I stood on the bloody stool to reach. Of course it broke under my weight. It was dodgy. When a 10-year-old sat on it under my weight, it just gave up. Spent the rest of the day in A&E with a broken elbow covered in pale pink paint. Painted the boys' room the following day and went into labor a few days later with my left arm in a sling. Of course it had to be on the side I lay on to give birth, not the most comfortable thing to do. I've never stood on a stool again, it's ladders, or I'm not painting it. Put my finger into a stick blender, slammed the car door on my hip, got stuck in a Z bed, drained spaghetti and threw it straight from the sieve into the bin, reversed into a large black and yellow striped pillar. I once stood on the end of rake to see if it really does come up and hit you in the face. It does. Shredded the wrong 3 train tickets and seat reservations, binned £250 in Icelandic currency, put a fork through my welly into the top of my foot while aerating the lawn. I could go on. Sent a text complaining about my boss to my boss. In a panic to make sure they didn't see it, I told them I'd been sexting my partner and sent it to them by accident, so could I have their phone for a minute to delete it when it arrived. It worked, but I'm still mortified about my excuse. I have to make change now as the story is well known in my friendship group. Decided I was going to make a square candle fit in a round glass holder. Melted the edges with my lighter, then tried to shove it in. The candle resisted, the glass shattered, and I ended up passing out in A&E as they dug lead crystal shards out of my hand. This is quite outing if anyone recognizes me. Last year I turned on DP's TV, lit some candles on the unit underneath it and then went into the kitchen. Came back into the lounge wondering what the weird burning smell was. Confused, miraculously the TV was still on, but the candle had burnt right through the sensor you aim the remote at, so we couldn't change the channel or anything. Next day I went to Curry's and bought a new one. That night once again I lit the same candle under the TV. Instead of melting this one, it left a huge black mark on the screen. I still have no idea what possessed me to light the same bloody candle again. I may have taken the TV back and pretended it came damaged and got given a replacement. Threw out £500, which I had in an envelope. Did the same with £200 about a year later. I'm a ducking idiot. Decided to superglue a tin opener that was broken. I glued it to the kitchen worktop and my hand to the tin opener. I used a very sharp knife to prise my hand off it. I must have lost 2 layers of skin. Rearranging DDS bedroom, I fell into the wardrobe off a chest of drawers and got stuck in it. I still don't know how I ended up in it. I had opened the door a bit for some reason, even though the chest of drawers were tight against it, and tumbled into the tiny gap. I'm not tiny confused. I had my phone in my pocket and had to phone my neighbor to come and rescue me. I was walking along the street and was that busy nosying I walked straight past the signs that a manhole was open and fell straight down it. This freezing weather reminded me I'm notoriously clumsy. Years ago, we had weeks of snow and the ponds had frozen. DH and I had walked miles and I saw this pond where the kids had made a slide across it. My eyes lit up. DH sighed and said, "No, just don't." I did. Comedy pratfall and fractured coccyx. Made a tart tatin in a pan that can go in the oven, but I'd never put in the oven before. Came to take it out and just grabbed the metal handle. Then had a trip to hospital with a very sore blistering hand. My 13 years old DS went in the shower. Came down afterwards with red eyes and raging, complaining about Johnson's baby shampoo. They've lied. No more tears. It does sting when it gets in your eyes. He deliberately put the shampoo in his eyes to test out their claims. At frazzled but Karma Emna and her DH took turns squirting J&J into their eyes to test it out before shampooing their PFB grin. My own DS. 10. Use body scrub as shampoo for a while. I found out when he complained about the bits in his hair from the scratchy new shampoo. Use some tinfoil lying on the side to take something out of the oven. Heated milk in the microwave to make hot chocolate. Learned the hard way why they say not to put metallic things in a microwave. It was so hot my skin literally stuck to it, and I had really bad burns all over my hand. Another one, took the waste of the kitchen sink to clean it out, but used the same sink to do the cleaning. I realized my mistake pretty much as soon as I turned on the tap. DH thought that was hilarious and still doesn't let me forget it. Walked into a cupboard once when going to an interview. Got a new kettle and quite a few of the reviews said that even after boiling it twice, before use as the instructions say, it still had a funny smell. I boiled it twice and after the second time, took the lid off and put my face into it and sniffed. As soon as I did it I knew what an idiot I was. Steam burns on my face were awful. I was attempting flat pack furniture, put a small bit of wood in the wrong place, forgot what they are called. I needed to remove it to put a screw in, so decided to use a knife. Knife slipped and sliced my hand, bloody everywhere as I hit a tendon. DP had to leave work and take me to A&E for many stitches. Put washing up liquid in the dishwasher when I'd run out of dishwasher tablets. Inexplicably thought it would pretty much work the same. Even though as a teen I'd seen what happens when you put washing up liquid in a town center fountain plenty of times. Boiled up chicken carcass with veg to make stock. Put a colander into the sink to drain it and didn't put anything underneath it to catch the liquid. Drained the whole lot down the sink. Did it again about a month later too. Heard a lovely bird in the garden the other day, took out my phone and opened flight radar to see what it was and where it was going. Took me around 20 minutes to figure out the mistake I had made. Locked my front door and then for some reason unknown to mankind posted my keys through the letterbox. I had to sleep on my mate's sofa for 3 nights until my mum, who had a spare key, was back from holiday and could let me in. I've done loads of stupid things, but last year I referred to myself in the third person and as mummy in a work meeting. Along the lines of mummy will take you through the presentation now. Moving out of a flat, while packing dropped one of my housemates' plate. Decided to glue it back together and left it to dry. Came back later to pick it up and realized I'd glued it to the worktop. Plate was a cheap IKEA one and definitely not worth the cost of a damaged worktop. Oh, and just the other day, I had a sink blockage. Unscrewed the U-bend, feeling DIY as dick, and then instantly tipped the contents down the sink, which now had no U-bend, just a hole into the cupboard below, where it all splashed straight back out. Jumped off a moving train. I was a teenager, and it was an older train with non-electronic doors. It pulled up at the station where my dad was waiting to collect me, and as I got to the door the train started pulling away. I panicked, opened the door and jumped out onto the platform, wearing wedge sandals. My dad saw the whole thing and nearly had a heart attack. Whilst showering, Scrub washed my most vital parts with original source mint and tea tree shower gel. You only really do that the once unless you have a niche interest in pain. My friend, Cough, agrees with you. She can also recommend reading the bottle before applying tea tree oil to sensitive areas. A, not a great idea anyway, and B, if you accidentally picked up Orbis oil instead, you're in for a very uncomfortable few hours. And do keep your deep heat lotion well away from anything else. Stapled my finger to see if it would go through a nail. If anyone is in doubt, yes it does. Yes, the ends of the staple curl over, and yes, it hurts, like dipping your wounded thumb in Satan's semen to remove it. Please learn from my stupidity. Pull the Christmas tree over on myself, trying to adjust the feet to stop it being lopsided. At the exact moment, I was thinking to myself, this is going to fall over if I pull it like this. Husband found me underneath it like the witch under the house in The Wizard of Oz. Oh, thought of another one. Asked for thrush cream in another language. Ran into the loo to apply. Realized too late it was for athlete's foot. As a child, running round a friend's back garden during her birthday party. Ran straight over the plastic manhole that covered a hole they had dug to store their dog's poo. Plastic broke and my foot and leg went into the hole. Was stuck and had to be pulled out by the dad. Had dog poo up to my thigh and got hosed down. Why would you store your dog poo in a hole in the ground? Moving a chest of drawers down a flight of steps with a friend. Realized we hadn't removed the drawers, so decided to stick them closed with a piece of sellotape. Like cut off. Q4 drawers flying out, pushing me down the stairs and then knocking me out. Sellotape. Yeah. Had an upside down fridge freezer, so tiny fridge part was on the floor, freezer above it. Trying to put a new light bulb in, couldn't see duck all, so I felt for the hole with my fingers. Yes, I stuck my finger into the socket and got an electric shock. Fell off the stage during a concert in high school. Whole choir turned to see where I'd gone. I climbed back up and tried to look nonchalant. Paper shredder got clogged up. Tried the reverse setting, but no, paper was reply jammed in there. Put the switch back to off. Also I thought, and then started poking the jammed bits with a shop knife, only for the shredder to start, and took the knife, which also got jammed in it. Yep, had put the shredder back on. DS found the whole situation hilarious. DP, maybe the unofficial taxi driver, phoned me saying someone won't get out of his car, told him to take her home, but he did not know where it was, so had to stop at a garage and ask for directions. Young and drunk on a Friday, was waiting for a late night bus and some guy in a car stopped and I went in the car to his miles away for the whole weekend. Family, friends and work all worried about me and had called the police pre-mobile. I was demolishing a rotten old shed in our new house with a hammer and handsaw. Couldn't get a bit at the back, so cut part of the roof from inside it. Yes, it completely collapsed on top of me, luckily only 10 stitches. Very naked, very pregnant photo sent to my boss instead of DP. She thought I looked blooming, loads more. My whole life seems to be WTF. I was sat on a single seat right, at the front of a bus. It was up a step and quite tight. My DH was sat further back where there was another empty seat. As the bus emptied, the seat next to him became free, and to this day, I have no fucking idea why I did this. Instead of stepping down into the middle of the bus, and then turning around, I decide I would turn before stepping down and attractively twirl around the pole. Except I didn't. I tripped over my own feet and landed flat on my face, tearing my ankle ligaments for good measure. Still swollen 8 years later. Saw an electric fence, went out hill walking and thought, I wonder what would happen if I touched it. Then did. Placed my knuckles on the plate of the plugged-in iron to see if it was hot. It was. Take an iron casserole, oven to table, dish out of oven using oven gloves, then took oven gloves off to move the casserole dish to table with my bare hands. It's like my brain is shrieking, "Do not touch," but I do it anyway. Rushing to get out to work one sunny morning, I ironed my t-shirt while wearing it. Iron still plugged in, burned myself, and spent the day with the tip of an iron shape visibly branded onto my chest. It was my birthday. I a very steep water slide years ago, think it was called the Kamikaze, or something like that. The highest, steepest drop slide you can imagine. I was instructed to keep my eyes shut, my head right back, and my arms crossed over my chest. On push-off, I decided to do none of those things. So cue the equivalent of industrial strength power hosing straight into my face, and spent the rest of the day with one missing contact lens, loss of nostril function, and completely deaf. The Greek godlike lifeguards thought I was hilarious though. Just remembered something my dad did that he wished he hadn't. My mum was ironing. The ironing board collapsed, and the hot iron was catapulted into the air. Dad leapt off the sofa, where he was sat watching telly, and caught it like a rugby ball. He didn't let go for ages. He said it didn't start hurting straight away. Ran through wet concrete as a kid. The guy had clearly just finished it too. His face was a picture. I shouted, "Sorry, mister," and ran for my life like something out of the Beano. My trainers were encased in cement. As an adult, I threw a cup of hot chocolate, no lid, straight at my partner instead of in the bin. I have no idea why. Peered closer to pick a scab near a horse's hoof. Horse snatched hoof up and kneed me square in the mouth. Blood everywhere. Predisposable lenses. I had lost my contact lens case. Can't remember why or how. So was keeping my lenses in 8 cups on the kitchen windowsill. Yes, I know. But I was young and foolish. Anyway, I woke up one morning full of energy and started cleaning the kitchen. Wiping down the table and work surfaces, mad washing up, scrubbing down the sink, clearing the windowsill, sweeping the floor. Oh, hold on a minute, did I just clear the windowsill? I said I was young and foolish. This happened many years ago, when I was a kid of 11 in the 1950s. A mate of mine did a dirty drawing on the toilet wall. Next day, one of my friends dragged me in there, and while I was standing nearby, the class snitch passed by. Later, when the headmistress asked if anyone knew about it, she's snitch, said, "Please miss, I saw N showing it to her friends." Headmistress asks me what I know about the drawing. If I had been a little more cunning and worldly wise, I would have told her, "Nothing, miss. My friend showed it to me." She would have gone to the friend. Then back and back through the chain of kids, until she met the first child to see it that day. She would never have solved the mystery, and no one could have been blamed. Like a bloody little fool, I told her that I knew who had done it, but I couldn't tell her, because that would be snitching. The headmistress then began to cajole and bully me. She said I was in big trouble, and she would contact my parents. I was scared I would get a beating from my father, so I eventually told her who did the drawing. The teacher did not believe me, and the other kids said I had drawn it. The headmistress made me get a bucket of water and scrub it off. That day I learned some valuable lessons. The meek do not inherit the earth, they inherit the dirt. People who are honest and truthful are not always believed. It is often the clever liars who get away with things. My childhood ended that day. When traveling in South America, I once put my trousers on without thoroughly shaking them first. Always shake out any clothes if you are somewhere where it's possible a nasty bug might be lurking. As I stood at a bus stop 15 minutes later, I felt the fangs of a spider sink into my shin. Thank goodness it wasn't higher confounded facepalm #hash. I had been bitten by a black widow. I splat it through the trouser leg. The bite swelled up to the size and redness of an apple, and I had a mild fever for 24 hours. I still shake clothes, shoes and towels to this day, and I now live back in England. I dropped my phone on my head to see if it hurt. It wasn't as bad as I thought, so I did it again, at a different angle. That was slightly more painful, but I thought, for some odd reason, I'd do it again for a third time to be 100% sure. I didn't do it a fourth. I was once sharing a hotel room with a friend, and she got locked inside the bathroom because of a dodgy door handle. After lots of jiggling of said handle from my side, we managed to get her out. In order to check whether it was a one-off or ongoing problem, I suggested she go back in and lock the door again. She did and promptly got locked in again until the hotel maintenance was able to get the door open. Far too many to count, including sharpening my finger in a pencil sharpener, heating a plastic beaker on a hob. But I'm glad I found my people. Told someone whose mother had just died, oh it's okay, the football season starts soon. Bought a massive tin of masonry paint, and when putting it in my boot I noticed the lid looked a bit wobbly. Thought it was okay. Drove home usual speed, and when home and opened the boot, the can had sort of exploded all over my car, onto the fence and the drive. It's still on the fence years later, and my boot is a pale yellow color. Idiot. Tried to put out a fire from burning fat in a grill pan by pouring water on it, mortified at own stupidity, was also very dangerous. I've posted this before, but what the hell. Notoriously clumsy, particularly with phones. Phone on my lap in the passenger seat. Arrive at destination, open car door, stand up, phone lands on ground. I look at it and think, wow, I'm so lucky it didn't smash, then stand in it with my full weight crushing it completely. Also numerous times today, I've had to go into the garden. Careful, I say to myself, the snow had frozen and it's really slippery. Inevitably I carefully navigate my way to the bin or wherever without incident, and congratulate myself so much on the walk back to the house I then slip. Every time. At home, alone, stone cold sober, and for no reason I can fathom, decided to try doing a Sporty Spice style high kick. I was wearing a pencil skirt. So as the right leg went up it took the left with it and I fell on my ass, so hard I winded myself. I'm very short and my kitchen is pretty small. Food is in cupboards and unless they're on the lowest shelf, I can't reach them. Often too lazy to get the steps. I can usually reach the next shelf up by using a pair of IKEA tongs to just drag them as close to the shelf edge as possible so I can grab it. Just before Christmas, I tried this method to reach a tin of soup on the highest shelf. The tongs weren't strong enough to grasp the tin, and it tumbled down straight onto my forehead. Big bump for weeks. My friend got into a high-kicking competition with her partner. He was in scruffy old boxer shorts with a hole in them. He said to her, "Oh yeah, check this out," high-kicked, and one of his bollocks popped out the hole. She nearly wet herself laughing, and I did too hearing the story. I worked in this sweet boutique. One of the items they sold were battery-operated light bulbs, just a little novelty light for a desk. One of them had arrived faulty, so I set about fixing it. Removed the glass, fiddles with the wires, good to go. Applied super glue to the glass and pushed it on with all the force God saw fit to give this idiot. Super glued fingers full of glass. I bled all over the store and had to run out to get plasters because someone had moved the first aid kit. Oh, and high kicking. Kicked over my cousin's head, entirely pissed, fell and broke my wrist in such a way that the bones overlapped. Right before a holiday to Spain. Ducking idiot. There was a piece of land next to our house, which 2 houses were being built on. One day I opened the front door, and there was a brick on the driveway. I had had a bad morning and was cursing the builders as I tried to throw it back, Forgot I'm totally crap at throwing and the brick fell onto my car windscreen, totally smashing it. Stood up on railings. The spike went through my shoe into foot. Nailing a piece of fence back on and leaning through to hammer nails on other side, realized I had now got head stuck on neighbor's side of fence. Walking down street, guy said, "Hi Jen," not me, "Did you enjoy the party?" Decided to pretend to be Jen, went back to his flat, decided didn't fancy him, said I'm going to get some booze, never went back. Or when 18 and bored, on the dole. I am in stitches at these. My DS was teething badly. I went into Boots and asked where the Anusol was and how to apply it. Ambisol is what I needed for DS. Also baked biscuits and used a plastic tray. I've no idea what possessed me. I knew it was plastic. It melted all over the oven. Used the shower curtain rail to see if I could swing. It came crashing down with me. I was an adult and slightly concussed. Put clove oil directly on my gum as thought it'd work quicker. Never touched the stuff again. Made a brew a few weeks ago, and rather than take the tea bag out the cup and put it in the bin, I threw the entire freshly made brew in the bin. This was a long time ago, but still makes me think WTF. I put a coat hanger down my back to do an impression of the band 5 Star. I'm as confused as you are about that one. Then tried to stop the cat who wasn't allowed in bedrooms getting up the stairs. The cat scratched me and I fell down the stairs. My sister found me at the bottom with a scratched face entangled with the cat in a coat hanger and couldn't work out what on earth had happened. I was about 14. Put my hand flat on the top of a ham and found the biggest, sharpest knife I could and, while thinking it wasn't a good idea, started cutting directly towards my hand. Entirely predictably, I made a nice deep slice on my index finger. First aid administered by blood-hating father, after which I put my bandaged hand back on top of the ham and tried again. And sliced so deeply into my thumb that it had to be stitched. Once while shaving my armpits, I wonder if it would hurt to shave your nipple. The pain was awful and wearing a bra was torture for ages. I also put a knife through my hand while trying to get burgers apart. I don't even like burgers. For reasons utterly beyond me, 2 weeks ago, I decided to reach into a hot oven to turn over the baguettes I'd been baking. Without an oven glove. I've now got a very nasty burn on my hand as a reminder of not to be so bloody stupid. Or rather think about what I'm doing rather than trying to multitask. I was doing dishes in sink and for some reason I will never understand, decided it would be a good time to change the fuse on a plug that had blew. Didn't even take the time to dry my hands and wait for the double whammy of stupid. Didn't put the cover on the plug, stuck said plug in wall socket and flicked the switch and promptly was fired across the room. Then I sat fascinated that the hairs on my arm resembled a hedgehog. I keep breaking plates by preheating them up on the gas hob. Our kitchen is ridiculously cold and when the plates come out the cupboard they're like ice. About 5 to 10 seconds on the smallest gas ring takes the chill off them so the food doesn't go stone cold as soon as you dish up. Twice now, I've forgotten and got distracted by something else needing to be done at dinner time and am rudely interrupted by the sound of a shattering plate. Worst thing is I still do it. I thought the blade of my pill splitter might be getting a bit dull, so I ran it down the length of my thumb to test the sharpness. It was still very sharp. Driving home from town once. I was heavily pregnant, with my 2-year-old also in the car. I could smell burning, but I thought it was because I was driving past a bloody crematorium. Wasn't until the car started to fill up with smoke that I realized it was on fire. We all got out fine, but I felt a bit of a tit. Loads. I put a hot pan on my PVC windows sill. It got stuck funnily enough. When I was drunk and young I put contact solution in my eyes, because they were stinging and I thought it would help. Ended up in A&E the next day. I had rubbed my eye that much I had scrapped it. It was agony. stapled my finger to see if it hurt. I did exactly this, not so much as to see if it hurt, more to see if it would actually go into flesh. Of course it went into flesh. It went in hard and deep. Missus. I did a ridiculous fake laugh to try and style it out while panicking as blood poured out of my thumb. My mum, God bless her, helped it out with tweezers under the kitchen tap while stifling her laughter. I was 15 and a bit drunk, wanted cheese on toast, disengaged brain and got a piece of bread, topped it with cheese, put it on a plate and stuck that directly on the cooker top. The fact that none of the shards of rapidly flying plate hit me is still confusing. About 2 years ago, on a Saturday morning, I was making breakfast for my DP. We drank day-to-day water out of Kaime glasses at the time, which are made of very thin glass. Dropped a jar. Somehow my hand got between the glass and the jar and got a nasty laceration. It could actually have been many times worse TBF. Still, I decided that I wasn't going to hospital because A, I couldn't be asked, B, it was Saturday morning, C, I was kind of scared too. So I sellotaped my hand up, trying to bunch the skin with the tape so it would heal properly. That night I was in the pub and the barman asked me what happened. It was only when he was totally horrified that I realized maybe using sellotape and toilet paper on a laceration and then going out on the piss was kind of silly. It healed nicely though, smiley face. I got free tickets to a big concert and was going to meet the artist. I got wankered, fell asleep in the bogs, wandered all over the place and had to be escorted back to my seat. Met the person afterwards and the look on their face was pretty sobering. I'm the worst at touching things to see if they are hot or sharp. I've grabbed an iron I dropped, walked across my kitchen holding a baking tray with my bare hand and even licked caramel straight out the pot. I test every new knife with my finger, even when I tell myself I shouldn't, I still do it. 2 of my worst injuries though are probably, I was washing dishes and noticed a hairline crack on a glass. Examined it and decided it would be okay, as it didn't look too bad, and it was a Taz glass, which I really loved. Holding a sponge, I put my hand inside the glass and dumped it in the hot water in the sink. The glass shattered right along the crack as soon as it touched the water and right where my pinky finger was. It sliced deeply into it at an angle and I bled everywhere. I ended up bandaging it up myself and went to the pub. I was late for meeting my mum and uncle for lunch, instead of getting it checked out, and just ordered a whiskey alongside my lunch as I thought it would stop me shaking from the shock. Blush, most of the bit that sliced healed perfectly fine, but a bit of it didn't stick back and died off and I now have a permanent dent in my finger. I've told this story before, although I can't remember the exact situation that led to the injury now and may have changed details before as so many people were told the story at the time. I'd been in bed with DH and nipped out to the loo after, totally naked. I peeked in to check DC was sleeping and closed the door afterwards. Right onto my nipple, which had dangled itself into the open hinge. DH said the noise I made didn't sound human, and I managed to wake both DC. My nipple pissed blood everywhere and anything touching it, even clothing, was agony for ages afterwards. A small bonus embarrassing one I just remembered. My dad had to take me to hospital one day to check for concussion. I was in my early 20s, visiting my parents and sitting on one of their dining chairs backwards. I leaned back forgetting there wasn't a chair back behind me and fell off, breaking the chair and also cracking my head off the door jamb. When I explained what happened to the doctor at A&E, he actually burst out laughing and then got me to repeat the story to his colleagues. I had been laughing telling him the story too. Thankfully, I didn't have a concussion, but the doctor jokingly told me that I was an adult, not a child, and to make sure to sit properly on chairs from then on. Halfway through making a cup of tea, I decided I'd rather have coffee. But rather than waste 1/2 a cup of tea, I'd just added the coffee to it. Seriously, I have never tasted anything so vile in my life. It was 20 or more years ago, and the memory of it still makes me retch. Just started big school age 13 and had to get the train in. Back into 80s, so with slam door trains. It was in the commuter belt, and I used to see all the commuters in suits opening the doors and stepping out onto the platform while the train was still moving. I thought it was a dumb thing, so tried it once. I went rolling down the platform while all the commuters stepped around me. Once when we were going on holiday, we stopped at a service station on the M1. I had to use the toilet in McDonald's. The loo was in a bad state. I went over to a guy in a short-sleeved blue shirt and tie and complained, telling him that he needed to be checking the toilet, only to be told by him that he didn't work at McDonald's. His work colleague looked embarrassed for him. I was just confused. Once whilst putting my shopping on the conveyor belt in Tesco, I noticed something had leaked. So, for some reason I can't fathom, I stuck my finger in it and licked my finger. It was laundry detergent. I got through the transaction, then rushed to toilet. I've done some pretty stupid things in my time, however this one takes the biscuit. I'd fallen while walking with my hands in my pockets and face planted the pavement, resulting in a pretty messed up face. The next day it looked even worse and was really painful all round my jaw, and NHS 24 recommended getting checked out. Duly went to the hospital and walking into the waiting room tripped over my own 2 feet and landed on my face again because my hands were in my pockets. Thankfully there were no breaks. I just looked like a monster for a while. I'd like to say I've learned my lesson, but I still walk with my hands in my pockets. The other day, I made a cup of tea when I was tired, got my hand wedged in the handle, then spilt boiling tea all over my hand as I was trying to extricate it from the handle. The water coming out of the tap was warm, so I decided to shove my hand in the freezer. The drawer wasn't opening very far, so I then got my hand stuck. It felt like I was about to get frostbite, so I pulled it out, and in my enthusiasm to ram the drawer shut, I also pressed the button which switches off the freezer. A couple of days later, I found frozen vegetables swimming in red berry water, which I spent ages cleaning up. FFS. At least my hand didn't blister from the tea. I still have a dent in my thigh from the time I tried to sew a tear in some jeans. The needle was nowhere near strong enough, but I thought it just needed a good push to get it through, so I braced it against my thigh. The fat end went in my leg with an audible pop. No blood luckily, but I was not sick pulling it back out again. In my first ever job, I laminated a penny. Just to see what would happen. Laminator busted. Obviously. In the middle of the night, I hear a blood-curdling scream. I rush into the bathroom to find my child of about 7 had used tea tree body scrub on her bits. I dumped her into the bath and hosed her down. I tried to close stubborn semi-broken sash window by putting my hands under the bottom sash and pulling. Window came down, trapping my hands at both wrists. Spent a couple hours trying to get the attention of my partner, who was working in the pub opposite. He didn't notice, so I had to wait until he got home. Around the same time, I ran downstairs from my flat to collect my post from the communal post box, grabbing my keys on the way out, because the door was one that locks behind you. Was mid-morning on my day off, so as I knew the occupants of the other flats were all at work, and it was a hot summer day, I didn't bother putting any clothes on, other body confidence of youth. Trouble is, I'd picked up my car keys. No house key. Had to borrow a huge winter coat from a rack that very luckily was outside the door of an upstairs neighbor, then knock on a few doors to find someone with a phone I could use to call my partner. This was pre-mobile, who was at work a few miles away. The only neighbor I could find who was at home was creepy pervert guy, who then heard me whispering to my partner that I was naked and proceeded to live up to his name. Had to walk the streets in a giant faux fur coat until partner got home. I still triple check I've got the right keys when I go out, although Baberek tummy has put paid to wanton nakedness. When my friend and I were younger, we came home drunk from a night out, decided we were hungry, and put some burgers wrapped in tin foil in the microwave. Her mum still thinks I'm the idiot and looks warily at me when I see her. Then, as we were getting ready for bed, I was walking around on the landing with a glass of hot salt water on my trendy new belly button piercing. I was trying to make my friend laugh by jumping up and down, so the water swished around and I fell backwards down the stairs, the glass smashing loudly. As we got into bed, my friend was so tired she didn't want to go back to the bathroom to take out her contact lenses, so she put them in pint glasses of water at the side of the bed, woke up thirsty in the night and downed them. I miss those days. Sprayed my laptop really intensely with flash and killed it. Sad it's not like I don't usually know that's wrong either. Must just been being a bit dopey that day. Used to go upstairs on the bus coming back from school and dangle upside down, like a bat over the stairs on that ledge thing. Bus stopped so abruptly mid-dangle, and I ended up doing the sickest backflip ever and landing on the stairs on my left knee, broke my thigh bone, and dislocated my kneecap, so the fucking bus driver had to pull over and phone an ambulance, as I was chalk white and sweaty, screaming in pain. Never been so mortified, and even to this day I don't know why I was so hell-bent on dangling. Worst thing was I was year 9 and the bus was full of year 10 and 11 boys that I was trying to impress. At the beginning of the first lockdown, in a moment of madness from COVID anxiety, I went to bed with a cup of tea in one hand and my phone in the other. I went to chuck my phone onto my bed and put the tea on the bedside table. Except I got it the wrong way round. You really wouldn't believe that a single cup of tea could saturate a whole king-size duvet. Put my thumb on a car lighter to see if it cooled down as fast as it heated up. It didn't. The smoke and the sizzling sound. The smell. Then the embarrassing looking around to see if anyone noticed my stupidity. Then my dad got in the car and asked what that smell was. I showed him my thumb and he just sighed. Every time I looked at my thumb and seen the lighter rings imprinted on it, I asked myself, why the fuck did I do that? Just because it's not glowing red doesn't mean it's not hot. I knew that, but for some reason I needed proof. I got drunk and slept with the shouty guy who got thrown off question time. In my defense, it happened many years before that episode of Question Time. I was so engrossed in this thread that I decided to do part of my skincare routine at the laptop so I could keep reading. I dropped an open bottle of serum, miraculously caught it, and then set it down on my actual laptop, just so that I could knock it over again 10 seconds later. It went all over the touchpad part, hoping and praying that I managed to intercept most of it. The screen just got bigger and bigger again, all by itself, which is probably not a good sign. Don't use Dettol mold and mildew spray above a metal curtain rail. The previous tenant will have fixed it up with solvent and not screws, which will be gradually dissolved and it will fall off and land on your bed in the middle of the night. This will A. Scare the SHHT out of you, B. Ducking hurt, and C. Teach your children a few new expletives. I used to be terrified of crane flies, aka daddy long legs. One night, I was sat drinking wine, and one landed on the table next to my wine glass. I picked my glass up and squished the DLL with the bottom of my glass. Only the force shattered the stem, which in turn shattered the glass, and my hand carried on with the downward trajectory into the shards of glass. I ended up at A&E with actual stitches in my thumb and still have the scars to tell the tale. My mum has 2 front doors. The new outside door, and then a very small porch, and the original front door which is now inside. I once started to leave the house, closed the internal door behind me and went to open the front door only to find it locked. Turned to go back in and realized the internal door had locked behind me. At which point I realized I had forgotten my keys. I was stuck in the porch. Thankfully, I had my phone with me and was able to call my mum, who had to leave work to free me. I was stuck there for an hour waiting. This was pre-smartphones, so I had nothing to do. My uncle had raging toothache, got up, went downstairs to get some clove oil. Applied to his tooth, decided he needed a pee while he was downstairs. Washed his hands and ended up howling with pain, and had to dip his penis in a glass of water. He is adamant it was a pint glass. My DH is the clumsiest person ever. Our DS was invited for a football trial. It had been raining, so everywhere was muddy. The ball was kicked out of play, so DH ran over to kick it back. Hands in his pockets, he casually ran over to the ball and slipped on his face, wriggling like a fish out of water to try and get his hands out of his pockets, and failed. His entire front was covered, including his face. Our DS denied he was his dad. Not me, but I still wondered WTF he did that for. X was selling his car. It was a wreck, and he was so keen to sell it. Someone was coming to view it, and he went out to meet them, but left the car keys in his flat, along with his flat keys. Desperate to get in, he put his hand through his letterbox to reach his front door keys, which were on the shelf inside. He couldn't quite reach them, so called me at work. A colleague drove me there, and he was totally stuck. We had to take the door off its hinges, and he was wearing the letterbox like a bangle. Reader, I dumped him. When I was pregnant with Dee Dee, I was craving toasted marshmallows, so decided to toast one over the hob, on a metal fork. Confused, I can still feel the metal searing my lip. Worst of it all, I still tried to eat the bloody marshmallow, whilst the fork prong was melting of burning my bottom lip. I decided to paint my bedroom walls with white paint, opened the paint pot, and put it on a shelf. Out of nowhere, the paint pot fell off, bounced on the wooden floor, exploded paint high into the air all over my head. I was in such shock I ran to the mirror and opened my eyes, and they were completely white with paint. I looked like Grasshopper off Kung Fu. I rushed to the doctor's, who had to look up the type of paint. It was in his book, and he cleaned it all out for me while shaking his head. Married STBXH, when we were seeing each other, he wouldn't call me for days. If we had an argument or disagreement, I married him, because clearly I didn't think it continued into our marriage, where he would ignore me for weeks at a time, and then started to do it to our son Prick, just glosses over it when it bring it up. I was going on holiday with some friends, and I was the only driver. Can't remember what, but we had to superglue something. Just as my friend said, make sure you don't glue your hand together. You are only driver. I glued all my fingers together and had to drive with one hand bunched up until we got somewhere with soap and water. Also, as a youngster, I loved sledding and knew no fear. Roads, rivers, lakes, and barbed wire fences. I have been in through them all in a determined effort to sled as far and fast as possible. A few weeks ago, I was walking through woods and it was a bit icy. Saw a fun rocky bit that looked proper icy. Thought, what's the worst that can happen? Broken wrist and dislocated thumb. Not me. I'm a lot more careful these days. But last time it snowed, kids were sledging down a hill, slowing down before they got to the path, before there was a steep, tree-covered bank going down to the river. So Daddy Knobhead decides to have a go, except being a big bloke, the momentum takes him crashing down the bank. Luckily not hurt. So he does it again. When I was in my mid-teens in UK and used to have what we called hitching races to get to various gigs, pubs and parties in the town I lived in dash. So the one wearing the least clothes would stand on the edge of the pavement, thumb out car or van would pull up and would jump out of the bushes into the car too. Usually had a skinful, or at least carrying a bottle of vod for the journey. It had kind of a race element to which group could get there first. We even used it to get to the Reading Festival, Phoenix Festival. Sharing a rancid cockroach-infested bedsit with a Mexican guy I met on the beach when he chatted me up in Cancun as I'd run out of money. and still had a week before my ticket back to Miami after backpacking down from Puerto Escondido. Living in the back of a transport van in New York as part of a traveling fair, I joined with my ex for a quick bit of cash in hand. It had no windows, and whenever we turned off the torch, you could hear things moving. We buck-bombed it, and it was also full of roaches. Hitching around ounce as a backpacker, after I wrote off the car I bought years before I emigrated here. Yeah, my 9 lives are defo used up. Sharpened a knife. Tested how sharp it was with my thumb. 3 stitches is how sharp the ducker was. DH does loads of stupid things, but the latest one was going to the toilet. He pulled down his jogging bottoms and the elastic rebounded and snapped him right in the area right between his dick and bollocks. I think they needed to invent a new decibel noise for what came out of him. Experimenting with my new chainsaw on a stick, and cut what seemed from the ground to be a small branch. It wasn't. And I wasn't wearing my hard hat. It hit me, really hard, on the head and knocked me out. Badly concussed, a completely purple and blue face and 5 weeks off work. Lit a candle and put it in a plastic candle holder. Fell asleep and woke up to my dresser on fire. In my defense, who makes plastic candle holders? I suppose you can also say who is equally dumb to buy a plastic candle holder, but I was 16. Was abroad for uni for a year. Had to renew my visa. The Houses of Parliament and Home Affairs Department are very close together and on the same street. I walk there and seeing the numbers guess I have arrived, although I didn't actually see the number I was looking for, just guesstimated. Saw police officers and people going through a side entrance and thought this must be the way. Past dozens of security, plainclothes and uniformed officers, and it just didn't click. There were a few dogs as well. Saw a sign that said, gun check, and saw people queuing up and having their bags checked and being x-rayed, and for some reason didn't think this applied to me. Saw the elevator. It needed a key card to open. Walked in with someone who used his card. He also had to use it to select the floor. I calmly said 4th floor, knew this is where I was going. Noticed his surprised face, but nothing clicked in my head. Got out on the 4th floor. Start looking for the immigration department. 2 uniformed officers immediately asked me what I was doing there. I was quite irritated and told them I need to renew my visa. Can they point me to the right office? It says 4th floor. They look dumbfounded. I insist again. They come and take my folder and check my letter and appointment. They laugh and ask me how I got up here. I'm getting increasingly annoyed. Then the penny drops. They humor me and find it pretty hilarious. I blindly walked through so many levels of security and realize I genuinely made a mistake. Let's just say I got a police escort to my appointment 150 m away. The building is clearly labeled with the street name and number as well, and they carried my documents and bag for me and wouldn't leave until they left me with the clerk. I am so grateful they believed me and didn't think I was a terrorist of some sort or shoot first. I'm also not too sure if they reported my breach. Props mistress on a very serious play about the Holocaust. The curtain was left open during the interval, and some of the audience remained in their seats chatting and watching us move things ready for the next act. I helped lift a trapdoor center stage, stepped backwards with it, but misjudged, and promptly disappeared from view. There was a collective gasp from the audience, who couldn't have known that I'd safely landed 3 feet down on a mattress placed below the trapdoor. I caught my chin on the edge of the stage though, and had to go to A&E for stitches. But luckily A&E was quiet, and I was backstage again before final curtain. I decided to make hot chocolate for me and 4 of my children. I carefully measured out 5 cups of milk, poured them into a big jug, and went to place the jug in the microwave. But the jug was too tall to fit in the microwave, so I poured out approximately 1 cup of milk and went to put the jug back in the microwave. Got on a down escalator and left my second leg behind at the top. so ended up doing the splits down the escalator until I couldn't any longer and had to quickly somehow drag my leg back to meet the other one. I had suddenly developed a fear of down escalators, which then lasted for about 10 years. I was about 8 at the time. Another time, I went up a level via escalator, and the only way down was via down escalator. I did it for a bit, then hit the emergency stop button and ran down the escalator, with alarm blaring, and it felt like a mall full of people staring at me. I once came home to find my hairdryer in the kitchen bin. My ex, who had very short hair, wouldn't tell me why. The next morning the kids excitedly told me how Daddy tried to make cheese on toast with my hairdryer and it broke. I have no idea what he was thinking, as we had a grill and a toasty maker. As a new driver, I was on a stretch of motorway driving back from somewhere I didn't know. I would always stick to the inside lane, but on this bit of motorway another lane joined it, so that the lane I was on became the middle lane. My junction was coming up and there was a huge lines of lorries on the inside lane. I freaked out a bit, but looked ahead and thought, okay, there's only a couple of lorries ahead, and then a gap so I can get past these ones and make my junction. All okay. Passed the first two, then the third pulled out in front of me, but was still going the same speed. I completely panicked. Lots of fast cars in the lanes to my right, so was too scared to change lanes that way to get past the lorry. Tried dropping back to see if there was a gap further back, but had cars come up behind me. My junction was approaching rapidly, and I was in a complete panic, and in my panic I literally squeezed my car through a gap between the lorry in front of me and the lorry to my left. So stupid and so very lucky that I didn't cause a massive pile-up. I'm feeling sick just typing this. Can't believe how stupid I was. Went out with a group of girls. Ended up getting totally trashed and ended up in this random house. I still don't know how I got there. Anyway, fell asleep on this big leather sofa, and when I woke up there were about 5 blokes sat round a big table snorting lines of coke. I had to try and navigate my way out of this house and finally found a road. Had to get my mum to come and get me. She was not impressed, and I think she was still in her pajamas. Many years ago, I had met a guy, my friend's cousin, who I fancied. After a night clubbing with him and my friend, we went to my friend's house where we shared a kiss. As I was trying to light a cigarette, he said something funny, so I did my best sexy flirty laugh at it. But I turned my head at the wrong time and set a huge chunk of my hair on fire. The smell was horrific. He found it hilarious. I had a bald patch on one side and smelt like burnt hair. So sexy confused, so my friend, after calming down from laughing, gave me towels, and I made my way to the shower to try to get rid of the not so sexy smell of burnt hair, thinking I would have a quick shower and still have time to salvage some sexy time with my crush. But I had just shampooed my hair when the shower suddenly stopped working. I texted my friend for help, and she came to the bathroom and couldn't fix it, so I was stood there in a towel with my hair covered in shampoo. Also not a good look. My friend said she would get some hot water to rinse my hair in the sink. So I waited for a few minutes, and she arrived into the bathroom with the kettle. She said it was cool, and I stupidly trusted her. She was fairly drunk and didn't check. She poured the contents over my head and burnt my scalp. I screamed. Turns out she had boiled the kettle and left it cool for 5 minutes. I thought she had added cold water or something to it. So my scalp was all red, including my big bald patch, by the time I got dressed and returned to my crush. I was so unsexy and in agony. A few days later, the skin on my head started peeling. So I had a bald patch that I was trying to cover, as well as a peeling head that resembles very bad dandruff. I never did run into that guy again. While pregnant, I threw my own handbag into a lake. I was talking to some old friends, gesticulating, and sort of swung my arm and let go, and it dropped into the serpentine. Everything was in there: phone, purse, Oyster card, keys, As a child, I played Tarzan and swung from the curtains. My parents had to get a plaster around to fix the war. Also, similar to the Brexit mistake, I spent a while mishearing Tisha and wondering why they kept talking about a tea shop on the news. Shaved my arms when I was a teen. Didn't have very good control back, and so I ended up slicing a decent inch of flesh off my wrist, which took ages to heal. Christmas Day. Partner's parents come over, so the pressure is on. Strained bread sauce, flavor-infused milk straight into the sink because I was so tired. Been overzealous with the cheese grating and ended up grating a huge chunk of fingertip. Still got the scar. Built a big heavy wardrobe from flat pack in my bedroom in a flat I'd just moved into on my own. Built it in front of bedroom door, ready to slide it into place. Didn't slide. Couldn't get out. Had to ring my dad, who was 50 miles away, to bust into the flat and get me out. Grabbed the wrong small clear bottle out of the bathroom that the Polish cleaning lady had helpfully lined up. No glasses on. Ended up sharing my hand sanitizer with the pregnant lady next to me. Funny that it wouldn't absorb or evaporate. We both read the bottle at the same time. Lube. Yup, I just lubed up a pregnant lady at a toddler group. Messing around after work, one day I grabbed a couple of little picture holders we sold. They were on a spring attached to a suction pad. I promptly stuck them on my forehead like a couple of antennae. Thought it was hilarious and got a few laughs. Unfortunately, when I eventually removed them, the suction had given me 2 fabulous hickeys right on my forehead. Early noughties fashion dictated I had a few bandanas in my possession, so I used them as a disguise. Looking like a wannabe gangster, I have never been so self-aware in lectures. I was in a rush to get into a shop before it closed. It already had, but I didn't realize, and crashed into the closed glass door. Large bump and bruise on forehead and nose. My pride was hurt too. My partner was looking out at our garden through the French doors in our living room. I then caught her trying to zoom in on the contents of some hanging baskets by putting her fingers on the door glass and doing the swipe out, an enlarged thing with her fingers. A bit outing if any of my friends and family are reading, but as a young teenager, I was annoyed to find that Debro had finished the Rice Krispies. I tried to make my own by putting a bowl of dry rice in the microwave on the logic that it would be just like popcorn. It was not. Tongue of flame leapt up from the superheated grains and the microwave was irreparable. Wintry weather, getting dark. XH threw a stick in the raging, flooding, cold river for the dog. She fetched it but couldn't get back to the bank. He jumps in the river to rescue her. I jump in the river to rescue him. 3DC left on the riverbank, screaming. Dog calmly lets herself drift down to a safe place and gets out. DC grab her, and they go back to the car. XH and I follow, eventually squelching, deeply ashamed. I'd always told the DC never, ever to enter the river to help the dog. The first and only time the dog needed help, yep, in we leap without a second thought. Mortifying. Twice, I have bitten my finger when it snuck inside a baguette. Grin, it hurts a lot. I have also fully brushed my teeth with Savlon while staying at my parents'. I was thinking, Dad's toothpaste is disgusting. When I was 14, boy dared me to take an E on the bus to school. I stupidly did, except it wasn't an E. It turned out it was a sleeping pill. I fell asleep in science, no one could wake me. The boy thought I was dying and confessed. The school rang my dad, who carried me out of school to much hilarity. I eventually woke to a world of trouble. In the summer, when I was 15, I was hanging around on a bench with my friend. My parents were away, and she'd been staying at mine. A car of men in their 20s pulled up and chatted for a bit, then asked if we wanted to go to a city 2 hours away. We said yes and hopped in. We went to a flat and got off our faces with them. They took us clubbing, then drove us home. We had a great time, but it dawned on us the next day that it could have been the worst decision we'd ever made. Last year, I bought a julienne peeler and decided to run my thumb over it as it didn't look sharp. It wasn't perfectly julienned my thumb. I didn't notice that a bus had come to the end of its route. The route had shortened and changed. The driver didn't see me and proceeded to drive off to a depot. It was a double-decker, so I went downstairs, sat down in a prominent position, and hoped he would see me. I didn't want to startle him and make him crash, as he was going really fast on a dual carriageway type road. He eventually saw me and was furious, dumped me out absolutely miles from where I needed to be, and I spent a couple of hours walking to where I could find a tube. It was when the Olympics site was being built in Stratford, so no maps were accurate. Also have twice got on completely the wrong train. The first time, I was 17 and heading to Manchester, I ended up in Leighton Buzzard. The second time, I was supposed to be going home and ended up at a seaside resort an hour's drive away. I had my DC with me. I'm loving this thread. At work, the caretaker had lifted a cover off a drain. I walked across the room reading a book and one leg went down. Luckily only scraped and bruised my leg. Colleague was in the room. I leapt up and claimed I was fine. My leg really hurt and my pride was dented. I still have a scar on my knee. At work, I ran down the fancy atrium stairs while wearing high heels, caught my heel on a step and crashed down the stairs in a heap. Highly embarrassed, I assured my concerned colleagues that I was okay while crying from the pain. Nothing was broken, but I had an enormous bruise on my bum and a swollen ankle for a while. When I was a kid, I had a battered old bike. The front mudguard had been getting increasingly loose in the preceding weeks. Whilst pedaling down the road at speed, I noticed it was now hanging off by one screw and reached down to jam it in place, came off in my hand. Wondered if it would snap if I put it through the spokes. It didn't. Fat lip and squashed nose ensued. I was looking at my phone and walked in front of a bus. Luckily the driver was on the ball enough to stop, but I can't believe how stupid I was. I lie awake thinking about how that could have been it for me. I won't ever do that again though, so every cloud and all that. I was coming out of a shop once after buying a sandwich that I was carrying. I tripped and fell over. So desperate not to drop my sandwich, I didn't use my hands and ended up hitting my head on the pavement. My sandwich was fine, but I was a bruised mess. I have found my people. Too many to remember, but yes to draining food and then throwing in bin, locking myself out, taking tray out of oven with glove and then taking the other tray out with bare hand. Was in a rush once and ironed clothes to be worn whilst I was wearing just my underwear. Stood too close to ironing board and burnt my stomach. Wanted to see how sharp my new knife was, so I ran it along my finger. The stuff I was mixing had all gone up the walls of the electric mixing bowl. So I pushed a wooden spoon down the pipe thing on top of the bowl while the mixer is still going. It was the most stupid possible thing. The spoon and bowl exploded into flying shards. I still marvel I didn't lose an eye. Totally outing. I slammed my own head in the car door. It was a horrible, wet, windy day, the type where the rain was being blasted horizontally. I had sort of dipped my head inside the door to get my bag out. I'm shutting the door. I somehow was still thinking must shield from this horrible rain and proceeded to slam the door shut on myself. It was sore. I don't know if anyone saw me, but I didn't help myself really when I walked into work and said you'll never guess what I just did. My husband's apprentice needed to drill a hole in a plank of wood. He braced it against his thigh. My husband didn't get to him in time, and he drilled into his thigh, only noticing when a big ribbon of flesh came whirling out. I picture it in my mind disturbingly often. Oh, I've got another one. I was walking home from my friends. I was 16. Beautiful, hot, sunny, glorious day. Wearing tight pink trousers and white t-shirt. Thought I lipped the bomb. And I did grin, heard lots of commotion coming from across the road. Lots of young guys in a house watching football or something. Noticed some had their tops off. Was admiring the view when I walked into a lamppost. Guys totally seen it, and I could still hear them roaring with laughter when I got to the bottom of the street, my face and trousers matching colors. Not long after passing my driving test, I went out in my little old banger down the motorway. Started to panic when it wouldn't go above 30 miles per hour with my foot to the floor. People were honking me, and looking in my rearview mirror, I could see a trail of smoke behind me. Finally made it to a petrol station and pulled over. Went to put the handbrake on and realized I hadn't taken it off. When I was about 6 months pregnant, I had to have a fasting blood test. After the first blood test, I had to drink this liquid and was told to return a few hours later. I thought it was a good idea to walk uphill to the shops heavily pregnant and on an empty stomach. I ended fainting in Waterstones, and they called an ambulance to take me back to the hospital. I was so embarrassed. A long time ago now, but I was minding my parents' home whilst they were away for a 6-week break. I was single, so I moved in with the dogs. They'd had a new in-suit done, and a few days before they were due home, I cleaned the house, top to bottom. Washed the taps with Cif or Jif, it was then. When they got home, I got a distress call from my mum, who said all the gold had come off the taps in the in-suit. No one told me they were so fragile and couldn't be cleaned with any box standard cleaner. So, 10 taps to be replaced. Double basin, bidet, bath with loads of knobs, toilet handle. I once climbed a wall which had a sign saying anti-climbing paint in use. I felt like I had to know what anti-climbing paint is. I certainly found out. Had an irritating sinus infection that made me constantly want to sneeze, but it would never quite happen. In frustration, I decided to force a sneeze by inhaling pepper. Jesus. It burned like hell. My face went tomato red. I was sweating and my eyes were streaming for 20 minutes, and I still didn't bloody sneeze. So many things, I wouldn't know where to start. Having staring into the sun competitions as a child in the tropics and developing cataracts probably has to be the most stupid thing. Left it a bit late to pick up son from after-school activity and couldn't find anywhere to parked in a spot that had a dropped curb and a car parked behind it, but I think also had a slightly faded parking spot marked alongside it. So I wondered if it might not be an official driveway. Some aren't around here, and anyway I'd only be a few minutes. Came back to a neighbor glaring at me, telling me the person in the house was a doctor and could have been on call, and what was I thinking blocking them in? I felt so ashamed and like such a cunt. I was terrified that he'd taken a photo and I was going to appear on some name and shame website or be reported to the school, and I toyed with delivering a card and flowers to the doctor's house with fulsome apologies. Then I realized I'd just have to live with the fact that some strangers might assume on the basis of my actions that I was a selfish bitch. And I'd have to live with that and not draw it out anymore. Not that long ago, I was a fully grown adult, visiting a petting farm and in the goat enclosure. One young lop-eared goat V-sweet was making lots of eye contact. I petted it and it sort of suckled my finger, so I wiggled my finger onto its tooth as I was curious how they felt. Thought to self, I should be careful I don't get bitten. Then Ari inserted my finger to feel the goat's flat ridged molar, and quite reasonably, the goat thought food and started chewing. Very painful and bloody finger resulted. My OH was incredulous. I would risk doing it a second time. Bought one of those home leg waxing kits. Put the jar of wax in the microwave to melt, took it out and promptly dropped it on the tiled floor. It smashed, shards of glass and hot wax cut and burnt my leg. What's worse, I didn't have anything on my feet, so I had to tiptoe out of the kitchen to get some slippers. Scraping glass shards encased in rapidly cooling wax off a tiled floor is not easy. When I was about 14, I was chewing gum in the bath, as you do. For some reason, I decided to see what would happen if I took the gum out of my mouth and put it on my pubic hair. It got stuck, that's what happened, and it was very painful trying to cut it out. Not me, but my mum. Walking into the supermarket together past one of those join the AA type stands. Man says, "Have you thought of joining, madam?" Instead of simply saying no thanks, I don't drive for some reason. My mum panics and says, "Oh no, me no drivey," and carries on into Sainsbury's, leaving me and the poor AA man looking at each other. Tesco in town. The up escalator was broke, so they switched the down one to go up instead. I didn't notice this and got on the usual down escalator, only to be catapulted back up and land sprawled on my ass at the top. I ripped out my nipple piercing whilst closing or opening the shower door. When I was a kid, I was running about outside my flats and fell in a tiny manhole and had to be rescued by the fire brigade. I chopped the end off my thumb last year. My first thought was, glad I'm not doing onions. I wouldn't be able to tell which bit was skin. I have millions more, but I need to engage my brain. I had a fad for growing my own chilies and making my own sauce. I even got Carolina Reapers to grow, which was good. Made a very potent sauce. Here's the thing. If you're handling the hottest known to man chilies, you really should wear gloves. Even if you think you've washed your hands properly, it lingers. As I discovered when I went to empty my moon cup. DH used hand sanitizer and then put his contact lenses in. I didn't know he could scream in such a high pitch. This resonates with me. My DS was 11 at the time and had arrived back from year 6 camp with suspected scabies. I know, hideous, right? Our GP had prescribed us large tubes of ointment to slather all over the poor little sod every night. Couple of drinks with my sister next evening. DS needs the cream on. I picked it up the medicine cabinet, started slathering it in him. DS said it's not the right cream. I state I know best. Turns out it was Anusol. I still mention it now he's an adult, because he can be a big asshole still. When I was about 16, I went out with my friends and the boy I was seeing to a teen dance club. He got up on a wooden dance podium, but it collapsed and he got taken to hospital with injuries. One of the bouncers came over to ask me if I was okay, as I was a bit shaken up as it partially collapsed on me too, and said he needed to take an incident report. We went to an office where I told him what happened and he gave me a glass of water. After he took the report, we went to leave the office, and I really don't know why, but I decided to grab his hand and hold it, and I didn't let go. For about half an hour he walked round the disco, continuing his duties with me holding his hand like a child. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Before you go, please like, comment, and subscribe for more daily uploads. Don't forget to click the notification bell.